She's one of India's best-known authors, yet we know very little about her. Millions have read her essays on the Narmada and the bomb, yet few have understood what these subjects really mean to her. So what is the reality behind this enigma? What sort of personality lies behind the author? Let's see if we can catch a glimpse of it as we meet Arundhati Roy. Arundhati, your writings don't convey a single clear idea of their author. Instead, what one has is a series of complex, sometimes even contradictory images. Would you agree with that?
No, I don't think so. I know that, there is a difference between fiction and non-fiction, which may be perceived by some as being schizophrenic or a different personality writing. But that isn't the case. It's just a different means of really talking about a philosophy.
Okay, let me see if I can understand that philosophy. In The God of Small Things, one forms the impression of the author as someone who takes an almost childlike wonder and delight in the lesser things of creation.
I would always sort of say that The God of Small Things, it isn't just about the small things. It's about how the very smallest thing connects to the very biggest.
In fact, it makes that connection between life as well. From the small to the big lies, in fact, the truth of existence.
Yeah, from the dent that the spider makes when its eggs hatch on the water and Esapin and Rahil are watching, to, what they feel as unprotected children in this very closed parochial community, to how history, it intrudes into their lives.
Okay, and that self-completes in itself. And then on the other side, you have your activist writings, your essays on the bomb, your essays on the Narmada. And there the image is of a woman struggling against the world, almost at times a lone voice in the wilderness.
Well, it isn't a lone voice. I think the saddest thing about this is that one, in the nuclear essay, as well as in the Narmada, I'm taking up issues that are not new. I'm only restating them, and that I think is something that has to constantly be done.
But you're doing it in the teeth of public convention. You're doing it against the graft and grain of wisdom.
I don't know about that. I think what we have begun to define as public is a very small, privileged public, but in the case, you take the case of the Narmada Valley or what's happening, one is really trying to make the connection between this very well-informed or supposedly well-informed public and a world that's slowly being cut off.
Okay, I want to talk first about the person making this connection, and then let's talk about the subject they connect with. Let's go back to the beginning. You were born, or you were at least christened, I believe, Susanna Arundhati Roy. When and why did you stop using Susanna?
When and why? I just don't like Susanna. I guess, it's just something that sits uneasily on me.
How old were you when you made this decision?
How old was I? I think even when I was in college, people used to call me Susie. A lot of people did, but I'd started using Arundhati.
So are you still Susie to old friends?
I have so many names that if somebody called me Rakesh or Suresh or something, I probably...
You don't really mind what you're called, but you'd rather not be called Susie or Susanna.
Yeah, I'm called that, but I'm called Roy by a lot of close friends. I'm called Nooni. I'm called...
Okay, you wrote somewhere that your childhood was spent catching fish and learning to be quiet. Now that sounds wonderfully evocative, but what does it mean?
I spent the earliest years, not the earliest, I was born in Shillong, but my first sentient years, let's say, in Imanham, the village in which the God of Small Things is set, on the banks of a river. And I had a sort of unsupervised childhood. My brother was 5 and I was 4 when my mother was divorced and we came back to this village. And we used to spend a lot of time fishing in the river, and somehow normally protected children wouldn't, at that age, would not be allowed to do that, and so being 4 years old and sitting quietly waiting for that fish to bite, it was magical, feeling of, I remember things that I thought when I was 4 years old. I actually remember it because...
What sort of memories do you keep with you today?
It's very odd that the first thing that I ever wrote, the first coherent sentence that I ever wrote, is in The God of Small Things, and I wrote it when I must have been 5.
What is the sentence?
It was about an Australian missionary who used to, whenever my mother wasn't around, she used to tell me that she could see Satan in my eyes. So I remember the first sentence was that I hate Miss Mitten and I think her knickers are torn. Yeah.
You said that your parents divorced when you were 4 or 5. Did you have a happy childhood?
I had moments of happiness in my childhood, yeah, but I wouldn't describe it as a happy one. It was a very intense one, but I wouldn't say happy.
Did you have a lot of love as a child?
I had, I think, I had 2 things. One, which is why you're always unsettled, a lot of love, but also a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of not knowing what was going to happen to me tomorrow, which is very unsettling for a child.
And this was entirely because of the circumstances of marital discord within which you were growing up?
No, I didn't grow up in marital discord because, my parents were divorced when I must have been 2 or something. So there was an absence of...
So where did the uncertainty and fear come from?
Just being in a, as I said, in this closed, traditional society, the child of a divorced mother. So your protector, your mother, is actually almost more vulnerable than you are. And all the prejudices of that society are being transmitted and radiated.
And as a child, you almost felt you had to protect your mother.
I know it's not that I felt I had to protect her, but I was. You don't know how to you don't know where what is going to come. As Esther says in the book, anything can happen to anyone. You had that sense of terrible fear and vulnerability to a world that you had no protection against.
And even today, I can sense that you're not happy talking about it. It troubles you to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't like to talk about my personal
Because it brings
life.
back those uncertainties. It brings back that fear.
Yeah, partly that, but it's also partly because I don't like to just,
You're cutting it off. You're pushing it into the background. It's over and done with.
Not just that. That's not important. It's not important for me to air my personal life to,
Okay, you left home at the age of 16. Did you feel as if you were being driven away, or were you striking out on your own?
No, I wasn't. It wasn't either of those things. It was just, I was just, I couldn't deal with what was happening to me at that time. So it was the easier option.
In a sense, to save yourself, you had to leave.
Yeah.
You went and lived for a while in a squatters' colony in Delhi, amongst beggars, selling beer bottles, I believe, to make a living, empty beer bottles. What was that like?
I was living initially in Firozshah Kotla, within the walls of the old fort. It was a little squatter colony. I was okay. It was, when you say it like this, it makes it sound tragic, but actually it wasn't. There was a group of us, all of us were, 16, 17, 18, studying architecture.
Were you rebels? Were you idealists? Were you running away from parents? Was
well,
there a common
motivation? I was without a family. The others weren't. They had, still their connection with the family. But all of us were very interested in what we were doing in college, interested in politics. The whole beginning of The God of Small Things, the nuclear essay, Narmada Valley, it all started initially with architecture, with trying to understand what I was studying there.
And these were the years when you were also being an architectural student. You were learning it.
Yeah.
So in a sense, would you be correct in saying that the idealism, the fire, the passion was born at this time?
It's, beyond that, there's also the humor, there's also the fact that, being 16 and 17 years old, being a woman or a girl at that age who has had an education or is getting an education, and yet you don't have these protections and these safety nets against this world, is an amazing university to learn in, and so that's where it comes from. I think, really experiencing the world without a safety net.
You wrote somewhere that you wanted to negotiate with the world on your own terms, without parents, without uncles, without aunts. Was that what you were doing at that age?
That's what I was doing, yeah.
And there was laughter amidst the uncertainty? Because I imagine it must have been pretty uncertain.
It was, but you know, when you're that young, you know, it doesn't matter. You know, you don't have this sense of, at least I don't remember for a minute thinking, what will become of me? You know, I just knew that...
You couldn't have cared less at the time
Yeah.
because the future was ahead.
Yeah, I know. It was just like, how am I going to, you know, pay my rent tomorrow? But I'll just make a mural, or I'll just design a letterhead for someone, or I'll just work in an office for, you know, at night, or whatever it is.
Okay, it was during these years, precarious but fun, that you met for the first time Pradeep Krishan. I gather he saw you on a bicycle.
I was working at the National Institute of Urban Affairs, but living on my own in a Barsati in Nizamuddin, and I met Pradeep.
You write somewhere that if you hadn't met him, you'd never have lived fully. Is he the anchor in your life today?
Yeah, well, he is. I don't want to talk about, you know, what he means to me, but yeah, he's a great, I think, you know, he occupies all the intellectual spaces that I don't, you know, so it's a nice team.
You're compatible.
It's like, yeah, it's like I'm floating around somewhere up there, and he's, you know...
He's also given you the love, hasn't he, that perhaps as a child you never had, that you wanted but didn't get?
I have to say that a lot of people have done that for me. You know, it is, you know, I am, at this point of time, a very loved person, and I know that, as well as the fact that I do love many people.
Okay,
Pradeep is.
It was sometime after you met Pradeep that you began writing. You wrote first for films, scripts for television, scripts for movies, and then slowly, perhaps even without intending it, you began to work on your book. How did it start?
Well, it started, of course, when I met Pradeep. He was making Masi Saab, his first film, and he just asked me to act in it, and acting isn't something that I ever wanted to really do, or nor do I want to act now, but I knew that I would get a ringside seat into how a film is made. And so I did Masi Saab. And after I did it, I realized that, you know, that's, I mean, it was never an accident, my writing. You know, I knew ever since I was a child that this is what I want to do. Not
ever since that sentence at the age of 5.
Oh, yeah, and then on. But I never thought I'd ever get, you know, when you're 16 and 17 and you have no source of income other than what you earn on a precarious daily basis, then it seemed like I'd never make it. You know, I'd never be able to be a writer, even though I wanted to try that out. But it didn't pan out that way. So after Masi Saab, you know, I used to write
Film
letters.
Scripts, and he gives it those ones.
I used to write letters to Pradeep, and I knew that one day he was going to write to me and say, I've never read writing like this. And that's what happened. You know.
So he gave you the
He
confidence?
was, yeah, I mean, he was the person who, let's say, who opened the doors, you know, who made it possible, that it seemed like who made it seem like a viable option rather than just a dream.
I'm going to at this point take a break, but I want to come back in part 2 and talk about your writing, and also a little bit about that magic moment when you won the Booker Prize, but in fact you weren't in the room when it was announced.
Yeah.
But first we're going to take a break. See you in a moment. Don't go away.